Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wulfhorst. This week, the Connecticut House unanimously passed a bill strengthening protections for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. This bill was referred from the legislature's Government Oversight Committee. Joining me now is that committee's chair, State Representative Lucy Dathan. Lucy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Emma, for having me today.
I really appreciate you checking in. I know you're busy with session as we speak. So starting off, though, walk me through what this bill would do.
Thank you so much. I mean, we all know that there are tens of thousands of domestic violence victims in our state, and we need to do what we can to protect them. Our House Bill 6883 goes an extra step by ensuring that addresses of domestic violence or sexual violence shelters are not disclosed in any sort of public forum, including town meetings and things like that.
So now when we talk about protections for survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault, you know, I don't think necessarily addresses of shelters or maybe the first thing that necessarily comes to people's minds. How was this issue raised to you? Can you tell me a little bit about how you found out that this was available public information?
Well, you know, there have been certain protections over domestic violence shelters, but one of my members, Sarah Kitt from Fairfield, she's been representing, I think, for 4 years now. She came to me and said she would like to provide the equal protections for folks in sexual violence shelters as well. So we wanted to make sure that there was parity between the two parties so that they were equally protected.
And for those who haven't experienced something like this or haven't, been exposed to the messages and, the outcries from some of our advocates that have lobbied at the Capitol and testified in support of this, why is having something like this on the books so important, protecting the addresses of these shelters?
Well, it's important for people who are, at risk of being homeless. They cannot stay in a situation where they are potentially at risk for in their current living situations. So they go into alternative housing if they're not feeling safe in a shelter environment where they are not right with their maybe alleged attacker, then they have an opportunity to be in a shelter, and ensuring that they can maintain safety within that shelter really keeps them from being homeless. And in a lot of situations, if it's a family member that's causing this sort of violence, we need to ensure that they have a place to be and a place that they feel safe so that they can begin their healing process.
And did you hear anything from constituents or advocates that really, solidified support on this for you? Or were there any stories or moments that stuck out to you?
Well, it's interesting because, I had heard from some folks within, the FOIA agency that this hasn't been an issue.
Right.
And so, I reached back out to the proponent of the bill, Representative Kitt, and said, are you sure? Have you heard about this issue being an issue? Or are we just trying to put an extra protection out there?
Sure.
And she came back and she said, no, it's a real issue. And so I went to our Office of Legislative Research and I asked them if they could provide some situations, and they came back with a handful of cases. And I was really surprised that there were a number of cases out there that hadn't been reported to FOIA. So they really weren't even aware that this was an issue. But with the legislative research that was done in speaking to advocates like the CCA DV that came back and said, actually, this is a huge issue and we need to make sure that, the residents of these shelters feel safe, and that their families feel safe, their children and other folks that are in that environment with them. And also the other members who are living in the shelters as well. Maybe their perpetrator might not know about the address, but if there's someone out there that does know, it does
Sure.
put the whole shelter at risk.
Right. And this bill, as we said, passed the House this week, and it passed unanimously. Did you expect this level of, complete and bipartisan support for this measure in the House?
To be honest, I felt like we were going to get good bipartisan support because I know that everybody does support survivors of domestic violence and sexual violence. But what I was not prepared for is that it was so quick.
Yeah.
I was expecting to have a lot more questions and a lot more, people really kind of wondering why we were doing this in the first place. And my ranking member and I had, a couple discussion and talked through some of the questions that his members might have and other things. And he and I were prepared, and we were really pretty surprised that it went quite as quickly and as smoothly. And it is always nice when things go bipartisanly, because I do honestly feel our best work that we do here is done on a bipartisan basis. And it's rare that you get 100% bipartisanship, but in this situation, I was feeling comfortable that our members here would see how important this issue is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard that from a lot of lawmakers I speak with, that, they feel like some of the best legislation that comes out and gets across the finish line is that is bipartisan, that has bipartisan support. But as you said, we do tend to get bipartisan support for quite a few things in the state legislature here, but it's not often that something is entirely unanimous like this. What sort of message do you think that sends to survivors to see that full support?
I think that is an incredibly strong message, because not only it says, we're behind you, but it says that we are here and believe you and hear you. Really are advocating for you. And there's other ways that we work to advocate and to support survivors. But I think the fact that this bill did pass so quickly and bipartisan, 100% bipartisan. I mean, it is, like you said, we do about, I think, 90% of the things we do are done with bipartisan support, but to get 100% bipartisan support where nobody voted no doesn't happen as often as you'd like.
And this bill now heads to the Senate. How confident are you in it being brought for a vote there and passed in that chamber as well? Have you had any conversations with your colleagues in the upper chamber?
Absolutely. I have a really good relationship with my co-chair, Senator Gaggar-Wilcox from Trumbull. And she and I have talked a lot about this. And there are a lot of champions of, domestic violence and sexual assault survivors in the Senate. So we do feel confidently, and we do need to make sure that we continue to put pressure on. So if, any of your listeners want to support this, I think the best way that they can do it is to call their senators and say, we'd love to have this bill called.
We know we're, inching closer to the end of session. Is there any concern about the calendar, about the timeline there? Or are you feeling, pretty confident?
There's always concern about the calendar. I mean, being a part-time legislature, and we are, within statute, it says in our Constitution says that we have to finish by midnight on that first Wednesday of the June calendar month in the long session. Time is not always our friend, and I'm working on a few other bills right now, and sitting in my office going between, the chamber discussions and meetings and trying to get other things over the finish line. Time is not always our friend. And sometimes things come up, where you have like a budget issue that comes up and that you didn't realize how much something might cost. But this is why it's so great that your listeners are active and want to learn what's going on in Hartford, because really, I think with, community involvement, community support, and hearing what's going on in our state is essential to making sure that we do good policy, and that folks really are able to be part of that process.
Absolutely. I always hear that from the lawmakers as well, the importance encouraging constituents and residents to reach out. Well, thank you so much, Representative Dathan, for checking in with me. We'll be following this bill, of course, as it heads to the Senate now.
Great. Well, thank you so much for bringing this issue to light, and getting your listeners and viewers to really see how important this issue is for our state.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time. We still have more to get to here, though, on The Real Story. The fight continues for just cause eviction protections. Advocates want the House to bring a bill for a vote before it's too late. We'll speak with two people spearheading that campaign coming up.